I'm really excited to have Dirk Pageant. I worked with him when he was a prosecutor in Bedford. He's going to talk about a lot of interesting things, to include his participation in the Gitmo trials that weren't, and all those different things. But more than anything, he was a prosecutor, one of the best prosecutors I've ever dealt with, especially when it came to drug cases. Has a lot of knowledge. Now he's running for Board of Supervisors. What we'll do is just have him talk a little bit about like where he's from, where he grew up. Just give us a little history of who you are and how you ended up in this chair that you're in.
Okay. Well, one, thank you for bringing me here today. Enjoy talking to you.
Oh,
it's a long time. I haven't seen you in a while.
I know. We won't talk about the last time we met. It's a different day. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, originally from Roanoke City.
Okay.
My dad was a Bedford County farmer. So he had a farm in Bedford County. We lived in the city, Roanoke City.
Okay.
I went to Roanoke City schools, which set the pace for what I did the rest of my life.
Okay.
There was a policeman called Eddie Harmony. One day he described me as a thug with a law degree. So
Okay.
that's at the base.
I remember Eddie.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you went to school there. Any brothers and sisters?
I had three brothers, one sister.
Okay.
One brother still survives. One sister she's still alive. She's in South Carolina.
Okay.
Both my parents are deceased. Really, at some point in time, we moved out to Bedford County and spent the majority of my youth on a farm.
Working every day, probably.
Working every day.
Okay.
Winter, spring, summer.
What kind of farm was it?
It was a cattle farm.
Okay. How many cattle did y'all have at
Yeah.
any given time?
He had about 30 cattle.
That's enough. So that's cool.
it was a
So you grew up in Bedford County. Did you go to Bedford County schools?
No, my mother insisted. She was quirky about the country.
Okay.
And because we had moved when I was in high school, she insisted I go continue to attend William Fleming.
Okay.
William Fleming is an inner city school,
Okay.
which looking back is astonishing because that was probably ran around with a lot of thugs.
Right.
Whereas had I owned the Bedford County, it would have been a different environment.
How did that impact how you look at things now? Like being around people that, I mean, you've been a prosecutor, you've been a prosecutor at both state, federal level, but also a military prosecutor and a defense attorney. Like being around that type of environment, I guess your mind and body aren't shocked about what you see as much when you grow up in that kind of environment. Would that be safe to say? Or
Well, it really prepared. Looking back, I didn't know what I was going through, but if you have to go to William Fleming, you have to be a little bit tougher. Mm-hmm. It's an inner city school. It's fights every day.
Okay.
Trash talking every day, and you learn not to be soft.
Yeah.
And so, because before I went in the Army right after high school.
Okay.
I think I went 20 days after I graduated. I went in the U.S. Army.
Okay.
I had to go. My dad says, sat me down at the kitchen table and says, ask me what my plans are. I says, I'll tell you the truth, I don't know. I'm not quite sure.
I just want to survive tomorrow at William Fleming.
Yeah.
That's my goal.
And he said, well, let me help you out.
Okay.
I says, you either getting a job, you going in the military, or you going to college. Now, you haven't put a lot of time in your grades, so I guess you're not going to college.
Okay.
So that narrows the two.
Okay.
He says, either way, you're out of here after you graduate from high school.
So tough love.
Yeah. So I had to ask permission to stay until I went in the Army on June 27th, 1980.
Okay. All right. So where'd you go to boot camp?
Boot camp, Fort Benning, Georgia, home of the infantry.
You actually were infantry too?
Infantry.
Blue cord all the way, right?
Blue cord. And it was
So you were in Harmony Church then, right?
No, Sand Hill.
Sand Hill. That's right. Oh,
Sand Hill.
yeah.
So
Nobody believes that. I went to boot camp there too, infantry, and nobody believes how hot Georgia gets. That you're walking on the concrete and your boots are sticking into the concrete, into the asphalt. Yeah.
I went in June, and they had Black Flag days.
Yeah, you couldn't train at all.
Couldn't train at all because it's so hot.
Yep.
It hit 95 to 100 degrees. We would do something, but the thunderstorms would roll in, and I remember once, unfortunately, it was tragic. Lightning hit one of the trees. We were bivouacked in the woods, on one of the ranges.
Yeah, FTX.
Yeah.
Field training exercise.
Yep. And the tree fell, and it fell on two guys in their tent. I mean, it was tragic. and the drill sergeants are screaming at us to throw your weapons down and run out into the fields and lay on the ground.
And if anybody's not been in the military, you do not, your gun, your weapon, this is my weapon, this is my gun. We won't go finish the rest of it. But bottom line is you don't separate yourself from that firearm under any condition.
Never.
And you have them yelling at you and you're in a state of confusion. Anyway, so what did y'all do?
I kept my weapon with me.
Like, this is a trick.
Yeah. And I went to lay down. And, it's so they train you. And subsequently, I went to Iraq, I served overseas, but you're so ingrained with that weapon.
Yeah, this doesn't separate from me at all.
The worst nightmare I ever had, ever. And I woke up in a panic.
Okay.
I dreamed I lost my weapon.
And who was yelling at you? Everybody? Or you were just looking for it?
I was frantic looking for that weapon.
Yeah.
And tearing things up. And I woke up. My wife looks at me and says, "You must have had a terrible dream." I went, "Oh, it did. I lost my weapon."
And she was like, "What?
What? What are you talking about?"
That is ignorant. I don't even know what you're talking about.
So what?
Yeah. So what? You got more than one. So,
yeah.
Yeah. Like I said, I know basic training. When I finished, I took a train from Columbus back here to Lynchburg. And I just remember I woke up in like a state of panic. I was like, they're still screwing with me. There is a drill sergeant somewhere. He's going to pop out of the seat in front of me and like PT me or something like that. But it didn't happen. But so what unit were you with in Iraq?
I was with the 360th Civil Affairs Unit.
Okay.
I was a Navy JAG officer. At that time, I'd switched service.
Okay. All right. Well, let's back up a little bit. I jumped ahead of you,
Yeah.
which I do. But anyway, so you go to basic training. Where do you get it? What was your first assignment?
First assignment was 8th Infantry Division in Baumholder, Germany.
Okay.
Home of the infantry.
Okay.
And it was armored personnel carriers.
Okay.
And so...
Are those the 118s? Is that what y'all were in or no?
Yeah, M118.
Okay.
That's right. And stayed there for my first tour of duty in Germany, which was a fantastic place to be stationed.
I bet it was, because you could drink at that point, right?
Oh, I'm 18.
Yeah. But I mean, you're not in the U.S. where, I mean, that's what they used to tell us all the time is like, you're old enough to die for your country, but not drink for your country.
Well, you see, I'm an old man. When I was 18, I could drink.
Okay.
But they changed the law when I came out of the military.
Because of you?
Could have been.
Yeah.
Could be.
Maybe. All right. So Germany, you're in Germany.
Germany, we had this little canteen, they called it. It was old German barracks, infantry barracks.
They don't know how to make beer in Germany, do they?
Phew. And so the beer was so strong.
Okay.
So strong. I got so used to drinking those KBs and other beers I had, cock barrels. Those are the ones I remember, KBs. And when I got back finally to the States, I could drink a case of beer, no effect.
Right.
Tolerance was so high for alcohol.
Because of their time.
Because the German beer, which is so heavy alcohol.
Right.
You drink one, man, you're
done.
You're done.
Yeah.
So I could drink, 12 pack.
I wonder how IPAs would compare, like those.
No
comparison. There's no comparison.
No comparison.
But it's closer than the water that the other beer companies have. Water with a little beer in it.
I mean, the German beer was it looked like a Coca-Cola.
Oh.
It's that dark.
Okay.
And so when you get used to that, when I came home, I was wild. I got out of the Army.
So when did you get out of the Army?
Well, I left Germany and I went to the 101st Airborne Division at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. And we did operations in Central America.
Okay.
During the time of...
So you had deployments even before you got out of the military.
Right.
Okay.
So we went to Central America, and that was during the time they were training insurgents, or whatever you want to call them. And the hot issue then was Nicaragua.
Yes.
And so...
Iran-Contra.
Yep. And we have vivid memories of those Black Hawk helicopters. We rode out to the west. We turned south. We turned east.
Right.
No clue where we're at.
Right.
And nap of the earth, they're right there.
They're right over
the top of the trees.
And, did you get the backwards facing seat ever on those nap of the earth?
No.
Oh, those are awful.
No.
Puke in your helmet.
We were on the side.
Oh, you got to lean out the side.
And we could tell, we were hauling it.
Yeah,
so we got down, I'd say at least 12 feet above the water. And you could see porpoises, jumping.
So it would have been cool, except you were on a Black Hawk.
Yeah. And
Let me ask you this: from being in the military, what's another name for a Black Hawk? Do you remember? The Crash Hawks.
Oh, yeah.
Remember they used to crash all the time. Everybody wanted to get on them for a while.
Yeah.
Everybody went from Hueys, and they're like, "I'm not getting on that Crash Hawk." So,
well, you can always tell the turbine engine. You know, you can always tell the difference. I can tell the difference between a Huey and a Black Hawk just by the sound from a distance.
right.
And so we did Nap of the Earth. I just remember I'm looking. I'm like, where are we going to land? Are we going to repel? I'm not sure how we're going to get in this jungle.
Right.
And far off, I see this little bald hill. I went, bingo.
That's where
And then we get the guys screaming at us, prepare for a hot landing.
So
like,
hot landing, for people that don't understand, that means you're taking fire more than likely.
You may be taking fire.
Right, okay.
And so we are coming in hot. They go from travel formation into weather formation. They're going to get in, they're going to get out quick.
Yeah,
So they're yelling at us.
get all your stuff and get ready to
Lock and load.
disembark quickly.
Yeah, lock and load, disembark, get off, using a lot of profanity, get the you-know-what out of here.
Yeah.
And we land, we get out.
The salty crew chief.
I'm carrying the
Off my bird.
M60. I'm carrying an M60 machine gun.
What was your loadout like that?
Gosh, it's so long ago, I don't remember.
But a ton of weight with all those extra.
Oh, absolutely. You know, they always give the 60 to the smallest guy.
Yeah.
I hate that.
Yeah.
And so,
I got a radio, so I can't say it was much.
oh, that's even worse.
Yeah.
So, you got two assistants. You got one guy carrying your tripod. You got other guy carrying other ammunition. And I got my full load ammunition. So you get off, we form the perimeter off the top of that bald hill. The helicopter's waiting. We're waiting. Helicopters are gone. They hear them as they go away. Nothing.
No hot.
No hot, quiet, nothing.
Okay.
And we descended off the hill into the jungle. And if you've ever been in the jungles of Central America,
I haven't, but I've heard it's not a lot of room to move.
if that's not the ninth level of Hades, I don't know what is.
Hot, sticky.
It's hot, humidity. You got black palm, which is these spikes coming out of these trees. And one guy just fell. His hand went against the black palm, impaled it. Went through it right into his hand. In the jungle, you can get easy infection.
Oh, because it's
Which is a problem because we're supposed to be a little stealth here.
yeah.
We got to medevac him out.
Yeah.
So that's a problem. He had to go back to the hill. But he did within an hour getting there.
Okay.
I remember walking over an ant trail, an army of red ants. They cut a path through the jungle. And I stepped in them just to
Get them.
step them.
Yeah,
Step on the ants.
Screw you, ant.
And I continued walking down the trail. I looked down. They had crawled all over me.
Yeah.
They were moving their way up.
And you're like, oh boy.
And these boys don't play.
No, they're biting.
They're biting. They're huge. So we had jungle fatigues, which was the old OD green jungle fatigues.
Okay.
With cotton,
Like
cotton
the
ripstop.
Vietnam type.
Yeah,
With the big pockets and everything.
loved them.
Yeah.
And jungle boots, and it's the way they dressed back then. Of course, the uniform. You have different iterations of uniform since then. And we were out there quite a while. And then we met up with the 5th Special Forces Group.
Okay.
And we're supposed to assist them in their training. Really, we're just trying to add security.
Yeah. Just
And there's two comments out of that. Oh, a boy named Buford from Louisiana, big guy. He was the other 60 gunner.
uh-huh.
And we're going through a mangrove swamp,
Right.
which is up to your waist, nastiness. Trees are dead in the middle of the sun.
So smacking your knees against them and everything, shins, everything else.
There's this big snake
Okay.
comes weaving through the water.
I hate a snake.
He panicked and let loose with his 60.
Did you hit it?
I don't think he even hit it. He was so shocked. So I took the 60 away from him. I said, give me that.
We can't be doing this.
We took his weapons away from him.
Say back of the line.
Yeah.
Not for you.
And so someone else took his 60. I took his 45. And
Not today.
not today, buddy.
Right.
Not
So
here.
so that was one of your military experiences. So you get out of the Army, you come back to Bedford, right?
Well, what I did, I came back, initially private practice, thought,
So during that
No,
time, how'd you get your law?
yeah, I went to college. I'm sorry. I went to Roanoke College. I went to University of Richmond to get my law degree.
Okay.
From there, I went into the United States Navy.
Okay. So is that back? Did you get a GI Bill? Is that how you paid for it, or did you have to work?
Back then, you had a Montgomery GI Bill.
Okay.
Which helped you, gave you a monthly stipend, not as
generous as it is now.
Right.
Yeah.
But
it helped. And so
you
get your law degry. So when you come back, what was your dad's conversation with you then? Like, what did you learn?
Well, I came back and he looked at me and he says, I remember the conversations like they were yesterday. He looked at me and says, "So, you served 3 years in the Army. What are you going to do now?" I said, "Well, I thought I'd get out of the Army. I'm going to college. My plan is I'm going to go 2 years Virginia Western. I'm going to Roanoke College, and then I'm going to law school."
Okay.
My dad says, "Well, you can come back and live here."
Oh, well, I mean, it sounds like tough love, but like when you see some of these kids that like don't have a work ethic, like it forces you still have that safety net. Right. He probably would never tell you that safety net was there, but like you did know, like, hey, I can go try this. But so you decide to go to law school.
Right.
You go to the University of Richmond. What's law school? I mean, everything I've ever heard about law school and taking your the bar exam. Did you take it in Roanoke too?
Yeah.
Everything I heard about it's like a nightmare, isn't it? Like trying to.
Well, back in the old days, everything is softened.
Okay.
And be honest with you, I'm blessed that I went through proudly when it was challenging.
Okay.
And in Richmond Law School, the first day you show up, you're expected to read your assignments. And
before you ever get to your first class.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so when you speak, you have to stand.
Okay.
And when you stand, they go through the Socratic method where they don't tell you the answer. You have to figure it out.
Okay.
And so that was 3 years of that. After a while, you get used to that. And great school, great professors. I was just talking about the bar exam this morning. I saw a young man who's starting his journey in the practice of law. Mm-hmm. And we were talking about the bar. We were laughing about the bar exam. And the favorite story I tell on that is I had studied that thing for weeks. The worst test I ever took in my life, and I'll never take another one, ever.
Okay.
And so when I got to the Roanoke Civic Center to take it, I remembered one of the questions will be about the newest statute that was enacted 3 years ago.
Okay.
Because they wait 3 years because there should be some judicial gloss, meaning some court rulings.
Right.
So I've been studying. I sat there in the parking lot for 2 hours rereading everything.
Ugh.
I looked at the statutes on arbitration. So I read it. I took the time to read it carefully again.
Okay.
Then I uttered an oath through the book in the back seat.
Yeah.
I'm not studying anymore. I'm done.
Yeah, I can't. I'm either going to do it or I'm not going to.
I'm not. So I came in, I relaxed. Back then you had to wear a suit and tie to take the bar exam. Mm-hmm. And people were nervous.
Did they make y'all wear tennis shoes? That is what I heard is like now they wear tennis shoes so it's not so loud.
No, you got to wear.
But they still had to wear a suit and tie.
Shirt and tie, work shoes.
Tennis shoes. Because
we didn't wear tennis shoes. We wear.
Whatever you would wear to court.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Dress shoes. So one guy.
And how many days is the bar exam?
It's 2 days.
Oh, and
multiple choice one day, essay the first.
And how long does it take you before you realize you're going to get your law license, like that, whether you pass it or not?
There was the rub.
Okay.
Back then,
okay,
if you got a small white envelope, you knew you had passed the bar.
A white one?
A small white envelope.
Okay.
Letter size.
Okay.
If you received a brown envelope, you failed the bar, and it contains your application for the next bar exam.
Ooh, that's kind of ruthless, isn't it? Yes. Like you didn't make it, but here's a time for you can come back and take it again.
Yeah. So I was going through Navy training.
Okay.
Because I decided to go in the Navy, be a JAG officer for the Navy.
Okay.
And I was going through officer training school, and I called home. My wife was all excited. Your letter came today. And I says, what is it? She said, it's a small white envelope.
And you're like, yes.
I said, that's it. I passed the bar.
So you didn't even have it. She didn't have to open it. You already knew.
I already knew.
Because of the color of the envelope.
Yep.
That's really cool. So let's talk about your JAG career. Like, cause I feel like I really want to get into, I think people will hear like, well, I think I hear this. I think I've known this. Like, what was your experience as a JAG officer? And then ultimately what led you to Guantanamo Bay?
Well, it started the Navy 4 years. Okay. After that, I came to Bedford County as a prosecutor.
Okay.
My experience with Guantanamo Bay began after the war began.
Okay.
I had served 4 years in the Navy. I went into the reserves.
Okay. All right. Well, so I don't jump ahead of you. Let's talk about your time as a prosecutor. I remember your time as prosecutor. There is no better friend to have when you have a drug suspect and his attorney. And I don't know if you remember your slogan. Do you remember it?
Yes.
Sir, ma'am, your client can either play ball or I'm going to shove that bat up his ass. Does that sound familiar?
Yep.
And realistically, that's how we got a ton of information. And I feel like I know Sheriff Brown, when he was there, like he wanted to say, which he did a phenomenal job. I can say that because I worked there, but like, I do think he did a really good job. But if we wouldn't have had a prosecutor holding them down like you were, it would have been a different story on these drug cases.
Well, a lot of the times, I was probably an aberration, and that is I really hated them.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
but you had to know the case, and you knew it was almost like playing poker. To me, when y'all go into these agreements with attorneys back and forth, it really does have something to do with the case that we bring you, but it also is how you present it to the other attorney.
Well, the key was not to be afraid to fail.
Yes. I mean, I didn't want to lead you into that, but like that is one of the things I think on this show that I love the most is I want to bring people in here that want to work to failure, figure out how that failure looks like, and then train past it. How much did you learn from failing? Like if you had a case, you're like, all right, I lost this one, but this isn't going to happen again. You learn from it, right?
Well, fortunately, in the Navy, in the 4 years I was in the Navy before I came to Bedford County,
okay,
I was a prosecutor.
Okay.
And defense counsel, prosecutor, and assistant United States attorney.
Oh,
special assistant.
Okay.
So I prosecuted in federal court, and I became the senior prosecutor on the Norfolk Naval Base, doing homicides, robberies, drug charges, you name it, I did it. Even looting and pillaging in Kuwait City. Okay. I even prosecuted the armed robbery of the USS Saginaw.
Somebody robbed a ship?
Robbed a warship.
Oof.
By gunpoint. And
in Norfolk?
In Norfolk. Crawled up the back of the ship in a ninja outfit. Went through the bowels of the ship.
Okay.
Came up through the conning tower.
Okay.
Pulled out a silver-plated 357. Put it in the disbursing officer's face, Disbo. Told him to open the safes. Now, usually back then, sailors were paid in cash.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
So there was probably $20 million in those safes.
Back in what year would that be?
1992, somewhere around there.
That is insane.
And so, fortunately, the Saginaw had been given word there's going to be delay in deployment. So the dispersing officer, afraid to have all that money in the safes, sent it back, except for $30,000. So when he opened the safes, he was enraged to find only $30,000 in cash. So he tied him up, duct tape, walked to the bridge of the quarterdeck, put his gun in the guards' faces, made them throw their guns in the drink.
And was that Marines then at that point, or
they were sailors?
Sailors, okay.
He walked off the dock into a fog, and nobody knew who did it.
Okay.
Yeah, and I worked on that investigation for months. Finally figured out
who worked it with you? NCIS? Is that who worked it?
FBI.
FBI worked the case. All right, so that's how you got to cross the. One of the ways you had to cross that.
Yeah, NCIS and FBI.
Okay.
And then we finally figured that out. It was a disgruntled lieutenant on the Saginaw who had been shipped out and came back and robbed the ship to get his CO in trouble.
So it wasn't, it was about the money, but it really wasn't about the money. It was just a little bit of both.
Yeah, but both.
So how did that tie back? I know we have a lot of technology to track stuff, but like it's just leg work.
It's leg work.
Okay.
It's leg work and FBI.
Okay.
Talking to everybody on that ship, and the chief looked at one of the agents and says, "Hey, here's a name you need to look at."
The Chiefs always know.
The Chiefs know. And so that was a case I did with Jack Rakowski. He was a great guy. He was down there with me. And I did a pretty good job because we did a lot of drug cases.
Okay.
And so when I came to Bedford County, I had a healthy experience, which is a wonderful way for a lawyer to obtain litigation experience before you go out in the civilian world.
Okay.
And so when I came to Bedford County, I'd gone through the trials where you made the stupid mistakes, you know, and learn from.
So you were
mistakes.
seasoned. You were somewhat seasoned.
Somewhat
seasoned, but you knew what it felt like to fail, and you knew what you had to do to prevent that.
But, you know, everything goes back because as a prosecutor in Bedford County, I remember going to William Fleming.
Okay.
And I didn't fall for that stuff. You know, telling me sad story.
How you were raised. And
Give it to somebody else, buddy.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear it. And so we did have a good saying, you know, either play ball with us or
shove the bat up your ass.
Yeah.
Yep. That's exactly right.
So this is it. I had the best client in the world, the Commonwealth of Virginia, and she never complained about my services. About how ruthless I was with anybody.
She was like, go get him.
Go get him, boy.
Yeah.
And so it was like.
So how many years were you a prosecutor in Bedford?
Shoot, I came there in 1995, I think.
Any cases that you had in Bedford that like stood out in your mind?
Yeah, it was the Sluter murder case.
Okay.
Did a lot of murder cases like everybody did. And Sluter murder case, this lady in 1996 was shot in the head by her husband. But when law enforcement showed up, it was a suicide.
I remember it was down towards the lake, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And Gary Faribault was the deputy who arrived on the scene.
Okay.
What didn't know is they didn't communicate with the EMTs. The EMTs showed up, and Roy Sluter looked at the EMTs and described it as a suicide. My wife shot herself in the head. A very flat effect.
Okay.
And Bobby Chumley, I still remember his name. Bobby Chumley's EMT.
Okay.
And he searched the floor for the gun. There was no gun. So he looked at each other and says, we need to get out of here. And he says, where's the gun at? And Roy Sluter says, I know where the gun's at. So Bobby Chumley says, I think maybe we're going to get out of here, wait for law enforcement.
Okay.
Law enforcement shows up. They don't communicate.
So they just come into a
So
scene.
Gary Faribault comes in. There's the gun.
Okay.
Right next to the body with white speckles all over the body. And so Gary Faribault has an engineering degree from Virginia Tech.
Okay.
But for him, I don't know if I could have won that case. He, like an engineer, mathematically exact location of the body, the blood spatter, the gun, everything on that diagram.
Okay.
And I always suspected that it was not a suicide.
But how many years did it take before he was actually tried for it?
7 years later.
Okay.
It was a cold case.
Is that the one Babb worked? Did he?
Gary Babb.
Okay.
Gary Babb worked that case, and
He worked it out of y'all's office, right?
no, he was
still
the
at
sheriff's office. He was sheriff's office.
But he didn't. Okay.
And so I went down with him, North Carolina. We were going to stake out and get a statement from Roy.
Okay.
And we had funny things happen when you're on I don't call it a stakeout because I never went on a stakeout like you guys do.
I mean, it's sort of it's like an ambush stakeout.
Yeah. So we waited for him to come back in the trailer park, and we watched this guy. We affectionately called him Earl.
Okay.
You know who this guy was? He had bib overalls, one strap undone.
You gotta keep that. But you're having like flashbacks to being back on the farm. Like, where's your cow, huh?
And so he's looking at his house. He's got this Ford Pinto.
Okay.
And we're bored. So we're watching this guy working on his Ford Pinto.
Okay. With the bib overalls.
Yeah, me and Gary Babb. And so this guy, he looks at us. He's looking at us. He's looking at us. He's looking at us. And you can tell it's a law enforcement vehicle.
Yeah.
And so he's working on his
One
Pinto.
of those undercover cars that have lights in the back.
It's not really undercover.
No.
And so he pushes on his brake pedal, gets out, runs around the back to see if the light came on.
You're like, that might be our guy.
all you could see, you couldn't hear us because we're in a car with air conditioning.
Yeah.
All you could see was two men, their heads going up and down, laughing hysterically.
It's like the damn things don't work.
So finally, he comes out with a mirror and he sets it to the rear of the vehicle
and then starts
and looking back there, putting on the brake pedal to see if it worked.
Oh my God.
Some of the silly memories you remember working on a case. So
Did
anyway,
you finally get a statement or no?
no, he never said anything. So I put it together with all forensic evidence.
Okay.
And that is, I had the pathologist, I had a firearm expert. What was noticeable was this. There was a white chalky substance on the trigger of the weapon.
Okay.
There was white substance all over the body. One day I looked at Tim Hayden, he was an investigator at that time. I said, I want to go to the crime scene and I got to figure this out. So I went to the crime scene. The owners graciously let us in there, and I went to the bedroom. The bed was in the same position because it was a small house on the lake. Mm-hmm. And I went in there and I said, Tim, close the door. I'm going to stay here by myself for a little while. He said, what? I said, I just need to think about it.
Okay.
So what I figured out was, if you look at the position of the body and the way was laying, I finally figured out she wasn't standing at all.
She's kneeling.
No, she was sitting.
Okay.
Because you know how you sit with your legs, brace yourself when you're sitting.
Mm-hmm.
And part of her right hand was blown out. This part, the meaty part.
Mm-hmm.
Well, she had put it up here.
A defense wound.
A defense wound to protect her from being shot. And that's why the blood spatter was only 18 inches above the ground, because she was so low to the ground to begin with.
Oh.
And so I figured that. I got out and I went, I got you, boy.
Yeah.
I said, there's only one less component. Where did the white speckles come from on her body?
Okay.
So then I figured that out.
What was that?
That was the artificial ceiling tiles.
Oh, so like those hanging ceilings.
You know, the false ceilings?
Yeah.
It's made of that white chalky substance.
Mm-hmm.
What he had done is, like I told you, the gun was found when Faribault got there. He threw the gun back into the room. The gun hit the ceiling and came down to the body, and the white speckles came from the ceiling tiles that came down on the body.
That is awesome.
So I confiscated that ceiling tile.
So it was still like that when you got there?
Yeah, I looked up and I said, there it was.
How many years later was that?
7 years.
7 years later, you look up and there's still a gun
There's a
from
dent
homicide.
from that homicide. So I said, Tim, I want it.
So I guess that I always think about it like funny ways of describing things, but like if the walls could talk, 7 years later, the ceiling spoke.
The ceiling told the story.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So we took that, and that was ceiling tile shown to the jury, along with it was all, I had no statements from Roy.
Right.
It was all put together.
I don't think people realize how difficult it is to prosecute somebody even a year or two later, much less 7 years later when he walked away from the scene. Because I think general public, for the most part, you really have to convince them like, hey, this really did happen. Because like from my standpoint, they look at it and go, well, why didn't they arrest him if it was that obvious?
It wasn't, because what they had done is they accepted for face value what the guy told them.
Right.
And wrote it off as a suicide.
Right.
Well, I kept it in my, one prosecutor worked on it, then I worked on it. I worked on that thing forever. Finally, I looked at the Commonwealth attorney. I said, I'm going to indict him. And, you know, I've already told you how aggressive I am.
Yeah.
He said,
he wasn't.
I don't think so. I don't think you can win that case.
You're like, I will try.
I said, well, I'm going to indict him.
Okay.
I've already prepared the indictments. It's going to the grand jury.
Good deal.
And so
you got your true bill?
He wasn't happy because he thought I indicted a loser. And so there was a 5-day jury trial. And on Friday, the jury came back on the same day she was buried. The trial started on the anniversary of her death.
7 years later.
And it ended on the day of her burial. And 7 years later.
Seven supposed to be a religious number?
It is.
Huh.
And so the jury came back with guilty. And my boss looked at me and says, you're not going to win. And the chief investigator says, you're not going to win. I says, you watch me.
And you did.
And I did win.
I just think about like with government in general, if there were more people like you that are willing to take that risk, I think that's the biggest thing in law enforcement right now is nobody wants to take a risk. It's terrifying because we want the public to like us. We want them to embrace us. And sometimes you have to do what's difficult. And sometimes you might be the only person standing there saying, no, we're going to do it. Well, despite what everybody else says, I know in my heart of hearts, this is right. And even if I lose, I've at least tried it.
Well, sometimes you got to stand alone.
Yeah.
And I've stood alone a lot in my life.
No, but I mean, but you're the type of person that makes that, and that's why you're here. It's because like I want people on here that will talk about like what it's like. I've got a guy coming on later that talked about like he took on the whole United States government, and he was right. But if he would not have stood up, one single human as big as the U.S. government is, he stood up. And if he hadn't stood up, nobody would have ever known what happened. And like for you, I think that's a good segue into like what happened at Guantanamo Bay. So you finish your prosecution time. You're in the reserve.
In reserves, 9/11 happens.
Okay.
And I was in court, in juvenile court in the
in Bedford
County.
Okay.
And I just finished juvenile court. Came in, the TV was on, and watching, and I watched the second plane go into the building. And it's shocking. It was shocking. I kept thinking, that can't be true. That's got to be an accident.
Yeah.
And in 2004, I was called up, went overseas with the Navy, and I was a
staff judge advocate. You're a JAG officer.
I was a JAG officer. And so they mobilized me, sent me overseas in 2004, and I stayed mostly in Kuwait.
So just real quick, what does a JAG officer look like in a deployment area? What is that? What exactly is your responsibilities over there?
Most of the time, you're looking at somebody who's the legal officer for the command.
Okay.
And going through rules of engagement.
Okay.
About when you can shoot, when you can't shoot, escalation of force. We were guarding the ports in my first tour, and so they had a serious escalation issue about whether the gunboats get too close, or by that time the war in Iraq is now an occupation force.
Okay.
And so now you worry about insurgents. And Ashwaba in Kuwait was the only deep water port in the North Arabian Gulf, the NAG.
Okay.
And so our job was to guard it, and I'm the SGA. I work with the Kuwaiti authorities. It's kind of cool. I went to the Kuwaiti embassy all the time.
They don't have any money in Kuwait, do they?
Oh my God. The goal of your life should become a Kuwaiti citizen.
Okay. So tell us what a Kuwaiti citizen does.
You don't have to work.
Okay.
The government pays for your house. They'll build you a new house.
Okay.
If you get tired of your car, you park the car on the side of the road and go pick out a new one.
People don't believe that. I know they don't, because I went to Dubai and it's the same way. Like the only people working are people that don't live there.
Yeah.
Or that aren't citizens of that.
If you're a third country national.
Yes.
You're there and you are, I don't call them slave labor, but you're the
peasants.
Yeah.
Peasants, the modern day peasants.
You're the one who washing the cars. You're the one who serving McDonald's. You're the one doing all this. You have people from the Philippines working in Kuwait. Mm-hmm. And so,
so you're liaison in between them and the United States Navy. Is that correct?
So we did that, and I thought I'm done. I've done my service. Mm-hmm. And I go back.
At that point, you've had what 2 or 3 deployments between the Army and that?
Yeah,
at least
that was the one for overseas. Come home. I'm back to Bedford County. I've done my duty.
Right.
I'm good.
Yeah.
Then they call me back up. This time, I am assigned to a U.S. Army unit, the 360th Civil Affairs Unit, which has taken a beating during the war.
Were they? They weren't the prison people, were they?
No.
Okay.
These guys working with the Iraqis to rebuild their economy. The law enforcement, the fire department.
So the Bremer type thing, Bremer type from the military side.
And so the American military is brilliant. We disbanded the Army, we disbanded the police, and we sent them all home with AK-47s.
We did it in Afghanistan too. We trained the Afghan National Army. We border police and everything else. And the only thing that made any difference for the government is, hey, we hit our magic number of people. We don't have any way to pay him. We have a tribal chief that's doing everything for us, and he's not paying his people. And then there you go. Like, why do we have a problem?
Same thing.
Yep, it is.
And so that tour of duty was a little more exciting, a little more bloody. And so I was assigned to Army units. And I was stationed originally at Camp Slater in Baghdad. I traveled throughout Iraq.
Did y'all usually do heavy motorcades, or did y'all fly, or a combination?
Combination. I'd go out with a MIT team.
What's a MIT team?
Military Transition Team. They're like company-sized element of Marines or Army unit, and they are out in, we call it Indian country.
Yeah, so we had a guy the other day that was on that was in Afghanistan, and I always think it's humorous, but not really, especially with the number of people that we lost. But like the military doctrine is not that much different than when we were playing cowboys and Indians. You know, you'd have a fort. You had a fortified area. You went through Indian country. Yep. That's where you got hit. Or if they massed and would come after the fort. But we're doing the same thing. So you go out with these teams, and
these teams, my job was to work with the local leaders.
Okay.
You know, to reestablish law and order. And sometimes it was hot. You had snipers. I mean, hot. I don't mean hot weather.
But it was hot.
It was hot.
It was hot.
Body armor, 120 degrees. But it was
a lot of negotiation, and people in that part of the country are master negotiators to get what they want, but they don't produce much.
No, they are. You got snipers, you got rockets, you got mortars. I went out with small teams. There's only one MOS in the Army that got more casualties than the infantry, and that's civil affairs.
Yeah, because they're going out there like negotiating, and you don't know what you're dealing with.
We spent a large amount of times out there with the Iraqis. And so sometimes I had to get the militia units to stop shooting at each other, which was a task in itself.
Yeah.
Negotiating with them, then you had to, don't shoot at us. That's very important.
Well, I think people don't understand tribes. Like the people in that part of the world look at things as like, I'm Sunni, you're Shia, we can't like each other. It doesn't matter what part of the city you're from or anything else.
They killed each other.
Yeah.
And they would, we did it. American Army, sometimes, I don't understand what's going on. You know, we would raid a mosque and take their weapons thinking it's against Americans. No, it's for self-defense. Because we took the weapons out of a mosque once. A week later, they came and killed everyone in that mosque. They had no weapons. So
and it's just hard. I think it's just like a blender over there because you don't know who's friendly, and I think a lot of times it depends on who wants what at that point in the day.
But my philosophy was there was no friendlies.
Yeah, including the people you were with.
Here's the people.
All right, so
walking beside me.
Guantanamo Bay. Tell us about. So you get that.
Get back before I'm even back from Iraq. I'm notified for the Navy. You are going to be. You have been selected for active duty status because I'm a reservist. Called back active duty.
Right.
And
so
now,
the inactive reserve portion of your reserve.
Yeah, I was a drilling reservist.
Okay.
They call me back. Now I'm active duty. I'm mobilized over a year. I'm in Iraq. I come back. I've already been notified. You're going to be activated to full-time active duty status. What?
What does that mean?
He says, no, you're coming back as a regular Navy officer, and you're going to be a prosecutor in the Office of Military Commissions. I'm like, you could always get out of a deployment, and that's what they call a deployment. It's not really a deployment. But I thought, how many times in your life do you prosecute people for war crimes? So,
so at that point, did you know what it was exactly, or
just
you hadn't got read in on it yet?
Just the scuttlebutt.
Okay.
The mission. I knew the mission, and when I showed up, prosecutors were flooding in. They were really ramping up the military commissions.
Okay.
So at one point, we had 55 prosecutors. And eventually I became one of the team chiefs.
So what the purpose of this, just kind of discuss what was the purpose. I mean, I know we have younger people that don't even know what Guantanamo Bay is, but what was the purpose of this? So these people have been held as enemy combatants for a period of time.
From Afghanistan and all over the world.
Okay.
We needed an internment facility. They were sent to the camps that were created at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. It's not U.S. soil. Therefore, we're not going to try them in U.S. courts.
Okay.
We're going to try them by military commission.
And so the military commission, a lot of that's more along the lines of like legal, how they were.
It's the military trials.
Okay.
And that is like Lincoln. The people who killed Abraham Lincoln were prosecuted by military commission, not by trials.
Okay. And I think if I'm understanding it right, one of the biggest concerns I think the general public had and other people, or at least that's what they fed, is they don't want to give these people a voice in our court system to spew their terrorist views.
Well, this was the problem.
Okay.
And Ali Soufan, who wrote a book, I guess that's a shout out for him, Black Flags.
That's right. Okay. All right.
He relays the story to me personally, where it all began with what we're going to do with these people. That was the early invasion, October of 2001, in Afghanistan.
Right.
They are now seizing Al-Qaeda's operatives, who are basically running like rats because we're annihilating them. And a lot of them fled south into Pakistan.
Okay.
And a lot were captured. And Ali Soufan relayed the story to me that he's with the FBI.
Okay.
And his idea is we're going to bring these people to New York and they're going to be prosecuted. Here came the CIA.
Okay.
He says, "Oh no, you're not."
And that is just tradecraft. They don't want their methods or anything else to get out.
Well, at this point they wanted the intel. This is way before that.
Okay.
They just wanted the intel.
So they didn't want to like relocate these people and not have an opportunity to interview them.
They did not want them to lawyer up. They want them to take them. And so they got C-130s landing before the FBI did. And that's why they went to Guantanamo Bay.
Okay. All right.
So they landed their C-130s. They loaded up the Al-Qaeda operatives, those and other suspects, Afghans, whatever
they found.
And some of them were sent directly to Guantanamo Bay.
Okay.
At that point, it was the old internment camps that they had used before. X-ray was the camp, and they put them in the old camp. But quickly after that, they established new camps on the other side of the bay, and that's where they started to stay. And it started to fill up to keep them from American courts. Now, the decision was made early on how they're going to be interrogated.
Okay.
And the first target was Abu Zubaydah.
Okay.
Who Ali gave a full statement to Ali Soufan, the FBI agent. You remember at that time, there's not many people in the FBI who spoke Arabic. And so Ali Soufan gave a full confession. He said, "Look, I'm telling you, I'm not Al-Qaeda. I supply Al-Qaeda."
Okay.
But that was
differentiating it.
Yeah.
Okay.
But, which is suspicious.
Yeah.
But, to say the least. But the CIA stepped in with their new enhanced interrogation program. Mm-hmm. We'll take it from here.
We got this. I hear something I like. I need more.
And so detainees started to disappear.
Okay.
And they went to black sites. And I'm not at liberty to tell you where they're at, but
I don't want to know.
And so a lot of them, that happened in 2001. And by 2003, 2006, they start to pop up at Guantanamo Bay.
Okay.
Well, here lies the problem. They've gone through enhanced interrogation techniques, which is waterboarding, other projects. I don't even know if I can allow it.
You don't have to go into it.
That's the one commonly known.
Yeah.
There are other programs, which we're not going to talk about.
Right.
And as a prosecutor for many years, now how am I going to get those statements in evidence?
There's no legal basis.
Yeah. So they sit down clean teams from the FBI to try to read them their rights and now get the same statement from them.
Which is a lot different.
Which is, well, we've already done this to them.
Maybe
it's tainted anyway, no matter what we do.
Right.
Because if they don't talk to us, maybe there's a threat. So really, how clean is that?
Yeah, it's not clean at all.
But we were really gearing up to go, and I became one of the team chiefs. I was a senior team chief, actually, and because I was the only one really with prosecution experience.
Okay.
And so I had about 12 attorneys under my command. I don't know, about 13 staff.
So I think about like different case files that we have. Like, what does an average case file look like?
This was the problem in the military. This was the problem with the commissions.
Okay.
When a detainee was caught and questioned, that several people may participate in the interviews.
Okay.
You know how you work with FBI, DEA, other
ROIs, reports of investigation.
Yeah. Now, how many people make a report?
Depends on. I mean, if there's two of us in there, one of us is making the report.
Well, see, in our world, in the government, every agency makes their own report.
Okay.
So they may glean a nugget here, one may glean a nugget here, and that finds its way in the reports. Okay. So you may get 5 reports
for the same
interview. For the same detainee.
Okay.
So what we got to do is search every agency to give us their reports.
Prosecutor to get that, and it probably wasn't. Some of them were less than cooperative.
Yeah, and some of the well, I'll get to that in a minute.
Okay.
My little boys at the agency, and so we would cross pollinate. You know, the State Department may send FBI report they got, so we're asking for all the reports. There's a lot of duplication.
Okay.
So, like one file was Sawa. That guy came to Guantanamo Bay. He was 185 pounds. Within 4 years, he weighed 400 pounds because he talked. And his only condition for talking was, I want cheeseburgers. So, literally.
So, is that another interrogation method?
It came for him.
Feed the hamburger?
Yeah. And so, if you brought him cheeseburgers, he'd talk. And so, consequently, some people, one doctor called that a level of abuse that we just kept feeding him to get information from him. Wow. He got so fat, he didn't have any clothes. He wore a sheet.
Okay.
So these techniques, we were going through these, and this information would come on Sawa. I must have got 300,000 documents.
Okay.
We had to use a complex concordance program to shift through the programs, shift the reports, identify reports, eliminate the duplicates, and it really come down to 3,000 documents.
But that's a lot to get in on a case.
Yeah, it's a ton.
I mean, when you think about 3,000 pages, I mean, how many binders is that?
Yeah, Tariq Sawa was a Egyptian. He had traveled from Bosnia.
Mm-hmm. And where did he come out of, or you don't know, or you can't say?
It's good.
Yes. The answer is yes.
And so he was caught in Afghanistan.
Okay.
He was a bomb maker. He was a trainer.
Okay.
To teach Al Qaeda how to make bombs.
Be more effective.
Yeah, and so they came in
duplicate their efforts that they were already doing in Iraq.
Right. They had a training camp in Afghanistan, and so when he was captured, they took him to Guantanamo Bay. He immediately started to cooperate, and they brought in the components and they asked him to make a trigger or triggering mechanism for a bomb. He did it in less than 10 minutes. And I had it on my shelf in my office, and every day at 3 p.m., thing went.
No way. You're like, these dudes are pretty good.
And they use Casio watches.
Okay.
And I always say Casio watches endorsed by Al Qaeda. It's just so accurate.
By the minute.
Yeah.
You know when to be off the X, right?
Yep. And they use Casio watches. And so I prepared prosecution for him, but we didn't prosecute him for a while because he was such a he's a cooperator.
Yeah.
The other one was ISN 54, which was Al-Kosi. These are all kunyas.
Okay. What does that mean?
Kunya is a name, nom de guerre. It's a war name.
Okay.
And it's not his real name, but he went by Al-Kosi.
Okay.
ISN number 54.
Okay.
He was Osama bin Laden's treasurer.
Okay.
He kept the money.
So he knew where all the bodies were.
Yeah.
And all the money to get the bodies.
So they didn't know how to do it. Those prosecutors didn't know how to do plea agreements.
Okay.
A lot of them, quite frankly,
yeah,
were rookies.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
not really.
That's why you got drafted.
Yeah. Not really seasoned professionals.
Right.
So I drafted the first template for those who obtained guilty pleas.
Okay.
Everything came from me. Okay. That was my template they used later.
Okay.
And
that you're talking about a template that they would do for a plea deal.
For a plea deal.
To get those people in and out.
Yeah. And
so you're the one that's responsible for getting the numbers so low.
Yeah.